Okay, so look, welcome to another of the TeachPD series. I'm Lachlan Kalish from the Division of Learning and Teaching, and today's session we're going to be having a bit of a refresh to do with Zoom meetings, or online meeting as CSU likes to call things. And specifically what I wanted to try and look at was features that had changed or updated over the past 6 to 12 months, because there certainly had been not sure if you're across the updates. I certainly seem to get reminded every week that there's almost a new version of Zoom out and about. And CSU does have a policy in place, technology policy, that should auto update or prompt you to auto update Zoom, usually within a week or two of a new version being available. But it's not infallible, and I've certainly seen instances where I needed to check myself. So yeah, that's what we're going to be looking at today is features of Zoom meetings with a particular bent towards new features in and around or changes to existing features. In terms of how I generally run these sessions, please use the chat pod as much as you want to. Go nuts in there. Pull me up at different points in time. That's fine. If you want to use the reactions in Zoom to get my attention, hands up, etc., that's all fine as well. But I will stop periodically to try and get a bead on where you're all at, if there are questions, etc., to be picked up then. The session is being recorded, as I mentioned, and I have a few, I guess, points to guide what I'm talking about than anything else, but I will provide you with a backup of the deck, so to speak, for your own records as well. And the recording will get put up onto the Professional Learning YouTube channel. So look, I think what I'm going to start with first is to make sure that everyone is on the same page. I definitely want to make sure that the terminology that I use is not throwing you in any way. So I just want to point firstly to the three different parts of Zoom meetings that I'm going to be talking about today. One of them being the Zoom desktop application. When we talk about the Zoom desktop application, you should have an icon like this here on your desktop. And that, when I say Zoom desktop app, that's what I'm talking about. The application that sits on your desktop, and when you open it up, you will have this lovely box. And this is the first one I'm talking about, because if you're checking to make sure you've got the current version of Zoom installed, the easiest way to do it is through this, left clicking on your profile picture in the top left right hand corner, and then clicking on check for updates. And you may be surprised to learn how far behind the updates you may or may not be, but the current version is 5.13.11, and that was current as of this morning. So you can't update Zoom while you're in a live meeting, but you can certainly do so after you jump out of this one. The process usually takes 20 seconds or so. And any new features that they bring along, for example, quite often you'll see the details of those captured underneath in the release notes. So that is the Zoom desktop application. I'm going to be talking about that a little bit in terms of some of the new features. The other space that we talk about with Zoom meetings is to do with the Zoom back end. And another name for that is the Charles Sturt University Zoom portal, which we get to through charlessturt.zoom.us. You get to this screen and you sign in, and it brings up what is referred to as the back end, which is ultimately where you can change a lot of your profile settings, access any of your recordings, get reports in terms of attendance, etc. So when I talk about the Zoom backend or the CSU Zoom portal, that's what I'm talking about here. Just anecdotally, every new session that we have, we get questions around people not able to access Zoom in their subject sites for some reason. It is almost always because they've never signed in to the Charles Sturt University Zoom portal. So if you've got sessionals or others that are teaching into your subjects that have had some kind of access problem with Zoom meetings, it's usually because they've never signed in to this page. If they do it once, the system will automatically create their Charles Sturt University Zoom profile. So even if they have access to I2 and to the subject site, until they've gone to this page one time and clicked sign in, they won't have a Zoom account to match to it. So if you've got people reporting Zoom access issues in an I2 site, it's almost always because they've never gone to this one time. So when I talk about the CSU Zoom portal and the Zoom backend, that's what I'm getting at there. And then, of course, the other one that I'm going to be referring to is the live Zoom meeting itself. So what we're looking at in here with our interface, that'll have the Zoom navigation bar along the bottom and whatever panels you may or may not have open at that point in time over on the right-hand side or potentially popped out. All right, so those are kind of our signposts for today's session. If I'm talking about things in the desktop app, things in the back end in the Zoom portal. And I have a question. Ali, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Lachlan, to interrupt your flow. Just on the sign in, would that be the same issue? So I've gone to try and add alternative hosts, but it's not recognizing their CSU email. Would that be because I haven't logged into Zoom before?
100%.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
That is exactly right. And we get that sort of question every session. It crops up when we add new staff in, even when they've got access to the subject site, they've just never gone to this page and click sign in. They only need to do it once and then they're right to go.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, let's get into the crazy world of Zoom updates. What have we got going on in this space? Well, first thing that they've added over the past 12 months is we now have an increase in the functionality in your chat pod. You may or may not be seeing it. By all means, have a look now. But when you click inside the chat, there are a whole lot more functions in there that were not there previously. You can, for example, respond specifically to anything that anyone else puts in there as a direct reply. So if I was to put in something in here into the chat, you will see directly underneath now you have a reply button that will allow you to respond to my comment. And so you get replies in line. That's very much a social media-esque type function, but it allows you to have targeted replies as such. You're also going to find when you put things into the chat that there is, if I move my chat panel, I might pop it out and move it over here for us to look at. Make it a bit bigger. Down the bottom now, you'll see that we have a formatting box, which was not there previously, which allows you to now use basic text formatting, bold, italics, underline, etc. In your Zoom posts. There are also hyperlinks that you can add in. Previously, you could copy and paste a link and drop it straight into the chat. So if I went to, say the Herald, for example, something like that. If I took a link, copied the link, and came back to, let's come back to the screen I was in. I could paste the link and it comes up as a hyperlink. You can now also click the link button and put the link in there. Same thing, just a different way of doing it. You also get, thank you, got a reply here with a reaction or an emoji. So you could use the emojis option underneath. Pick any one of, there are thousands, I believe. So if you wanted to use the toilet emoji, for example, to respond to something that I was saying, you could certainly do so. You can use some more inline editing, bulleting, number lists, etc. There's even a code snippet tool if you wanted to paste that in. Quotations, inserting quotes, etc. So there's more functionality that can go into the chat panel now than there ever was before. Slight difference in terms of using emojis as responses in the chat panel. They appear nowhere else. So if I'm not looking at the chat, I can't see those. But if you were to use the reactions in the meeting down the bottom in your Zoom navbar, clicking on your reactions, same with your participants. When you put those in, they appear above the videos. I can see those above Nundi's, for example, other people putting in reactions. They also appear next to the participant's name briefly if you're looking at the participant panel. So in terms of getting instant feedback for things, the reactions are probably a better way of doing that, unless your eyes are glued to the chat pod. So that's reactions versus emojis, etc. What else have we got going on? You can add in screenshots now. When you click on the screenshot tool, it'll bring up a crosshair, and then you can take a screenshot of something and hit the capture button, and then that will insert that into the chat. Let's see if that works. Getting a blank screen, that's excellent. All right, so for example, if I was to screenshot or capture, I wonder if maybe it prevents photos from being captured or images. I can certainly highlight that area and hit capture. It does stick it into the reply automatically up there. Yeah, okay. So I think maybe it's got a problem with capturing webcam images from Zoom, and maybe it's a privacy thing, but you can't snip that. But certainly you can use the screenshot tool in the chat to grab snippets, the same as if you were using the snip tool in Windows, and drop those straight into the chat. It'll also do copy and pasting of images directly from, say, an image search. So if I went to Google Images and put in Muppet Swedish Chef and said, yep, I want that, copy the image back to our chat, Control V to paste, says me. Now it's not going to do it. Great. I guarantee that it will let me do this, whether I'm using the snipping tool or grabbing it from images, but that's the copy and paste function that will allow you to drop that in. You can share a file. You were always able to share a file within Zoom meetings. The limit in terms of your file size now is 512 megabytes. So if you're interested in the size of files that you can share inside Zoom, the meetings, 512 megabyte. All right, so that's our updated chat functionality. If I bring back my guide, get rid of our images. Let's go back to here. Here we go. All right, so file attachments, 512 megabytes. Next up, the actual online meeting tool within i2, also called LTI, Learning Technology Integration. A few points. It's supposed to pick up the role of the person within the subject site. So if you've added people as instructors or full staff to a subject site, Zoom, the online meeting tool in Zoom it will allow them into the meeting. But if they're, as we said before, if they've never signed into Zoom before in the back end, it can't pair up their subject profile and email with their Zoom account. So that's what we were talking about before. They need to have signed into Zoom once, but your students and staff will be able to join the meeting most easily going through the subject site. If they try and enter just through a link that you give them in an announcement, for example, it's got no way of verifying who they are. So they're coming up as a guest and not necessarily getting user roles that you need. When I'm talking about the personal meeting room, if we go into the online meeting tab in one of these subject sites, the personal meeting room tab, as described, it matches up to your own personal profile, which no one else can see. And if you start creating rooms where you're using your personal meeting profile inside this tool, the recordings will break. They won't work properly for students to be able to access. They may appear in other subject sites that you have access to or that you teach into. So really the rule here is don't use a personal meeting room when you're creating Zoom meetings. Give them a new meeting ID each time. Not sure if anyone's had that problem before, but it certainly crops up pretty regularly for anyone in support. When you schedule meetings inside this tool, after the time and date has passed, they will appear under the previous meetings tab. You'll also get a report option, which will show you your attendee lists if you're looking for those after the fact. And the recordings, if you've captured recordings from the tool, they'll appear inside the cloud recordings section. Clicking inside those, it will give you whatever formats that you might have selected in your profile settings. So if you choose to record gallery view, speaker view, and there are a number of other types of views that you can capture, you're going to have a lot more files in here as well. At the moment, I've got the speaker view being captured with a shared screen, a copy of the audio file, and the chat transcript. And Ingrid has a question.
Just going back to the personal meeting room, I do tutoring for First Nations and things like that. Can I use that if I go in from my CSU Zoom site, my own one where I sign in? Does that going to mess up the recordings as well?
Yeah, it's just the PMR in general. With recordings, it has a problem. It tends to break sometimes. So you're better off just creating a new meeting for specifically for that purpose, and giving the people the link to it, and then the recordings will be fine. But when you go to create a meeting, if you're using the personal meeting room option, you're going to have some kind of problem eventually to do with recordings.
Okay, so it's not to do like if I going through the subject side of that, it's just overall using that personal meeting room.
Yeah, it is. It's to do with the personal meeting room. It's just how it's also reflected inside the subject side as well. But
Okay.
yeah, just avoid using the PMR in general if you can for things you need to record.
Okay, thanks.
That's okay. Ali.
Yeah, so is there an issue if we set up a Zoom meeting in the subject site for the students, say an online lecture, but we have our own meetings that we've scheduled just via the Outlook app, or, you know, that have nothing to do with the subject? Is there any, does it cut out? Can we have two meetings that we've set up ourselves, I guess, going at once?
Yeah, okay, it's a good question. If you create a meeting inside this tool using schedule a new meeting, or you import it using the three dots and import the meeting ID so it appears in this list, the students will be able to see it. So if you are creating meetings in the Zoom backend, in the Zoom portal, for example, scheduling new meetings in here, the students have no way of getting this detail unless you provide it to them. So if you create it for other purposes, no problem. But anything that you make inside the online meeting tool in the subject site is going to be visible to the students.
Yeah, so I've only ever used the subject site for course-related meetings, and all my other work meetings go separately. But there's no problem if those are happening concurrently, is I guess the, you know,
so you're asking, can meetings run at the same time?
Yeah, if I mean, I've still scheduled both. That's, you know, and they might say, if I mean, I had a lecture, Zoom lecture yesterday that I wasn't at, I didn't deliver, I just set it up in the course site so the students could join. And then I had another meeting afterwards. And, you know, I don't want the recording to drop out, or say your host has joined another meeting or something like that.
Yeah, okay. So the issue that we have is that every time a Zoom meeting is run, a user license, a host user license is engaged or is required for that. Now, by default, it's the person that created the meeting whose license is being used at that point in time. Now, if you have two meetings set at the same time, and let's say no one else turned up, only one of those is going to work, because your host license, your user license for Zoom can only be used in one room at one point in time. Things that offset that are when another person comes in and is made a host, the license will then shift across and it'll use their license. And then you can do what you need to do in that second space. So when you have co-hosts or alternative hosts and they turn up in the other space, then that's fine. They're taking that license and using it, and you can run your meeting in the other space. But if not, or if it's just students, for example, there's only still the one license that's being used at the same point in time. So it is something that we have to kind of come up with an alternative solution for if you're trying to run things at the same time. One way around it would be to use the scheduling rights feature, which we can talk about. You may be familiar with it, but booking on behalf of someone else who has a Zoom account is a good way around it. So if you get scheduling rights, for example, for some of your other teaching team, and you book meetings in their name, that means you're not using your license, you're using their license for that. which is a good way around that. And I can certainly, we can catch up and I can show you through that if you like. Yeah, it's a good option. But otherwise, the things running at the same time in Zoom without having already figured out who the host rights are going to sit with, can be problematic.
Okay, it's good to know. I mean, by convention, we do usually put the instructor as alternative host, but I can just see things happening, and yeah. Anyway,
as long as they turn up on time, no problem. If they don't turn up on time, then it's trying to use both licenses at the same time, and when you join the new meeting, the previous one will get kicked out. We'll stop. Yeah.
And I notice on that screen there, you haven't got the ability to edit any of those meetings.
Absolutely.
So and we've run into this problem before. So several instructors on the one course, if someone's away, we go to edit a meeting and we can't, even if we've been made alternative host. The workaround I've found is to go actually to the web login to Zoom and assign that person scheduling privileges. Is that the workaround, or is there a way to recognize
generally
instructors?
speaking, editing is always restricted to the host, the creator of the meeting in the first instance. That's kind of your default rule. So those are the people that can see edit. Some parts of editing, if we were to look at, for example, things like recordings and stuff, and the titling around them, I can't see any edit options here, for example, again, even though I'm an instructor in the site. They are restricted to the host, the original creator, and there isn't really a way around that unless you were to kind of log a job with DIT and get one of the admins to access the back-end settings of that user. There's about 4 people at the uni who can do that. But yeah, you basically get hold of them through the service desk. Yeah, editing's pretty tricky. We will talk more about editing because there has been a really positive change in Zoom to do with editing in the past month or two. All right, let's keep going. I've talked about avoiding the PMR. Previous meetings also give you access to attendance if you need them. You can't use the same meeting ID across multiple subject sites. I get this one all the time. People with different subject sites wanting students at the same time in different sites to join the same Zoom meetings. The online meeting tool, if we go back to our subject site, this meeting with this meeting ID can only be used in one of these tools at a time. I can't add another online meeting tool in another subject site and import this same meeting. It just won't let me do it. And the only way we can provide that information to people in other subject sites is to manually give the links, etc., to the students outside of this tool. Generally, the workaround for that is to put in an object with a table in it, for example, like this, where we end up manually putting in the links to meetings, etc., and afterwards recording links, etc., get manually provisioned. It's not pretty, but it's the only way really we have to provision meeting details into a secondary subject site. We also can't add attachments to the online meeting tool that we were looking at, which is annoying if you've got slides and other things from it and you have to provide them to students in another way. So in this instance, they just add them to a table after each of the meetings. So if you're interested in getting hold of the package to import this sort of table into your subject site, then yeah, send me an email and I'll send that to you. That's fine. Right. What else have we got going on? Cloud recordings in the online meeting tool. We can't get transcripts for them inside the recordings tab. The only way you can get the transcript is to actually watch the recording and then download the transcript. That's how you get it. So it's not available inline inside the online meeting tool. In here, for example, when we look at the recordings in those files, there's no transcript here. You can get chat, audio, video, that's it. But if you watch the recording, you then have the option to download the transcript. So yeah, I sometimes get asked about transcripts and why they're not available in here. Okay, some more exciting stuff. Recording and editing in Zoom. This is probably the biggest change which has happened. One of the biggest complaints we have about Zoom with its recordings is that firstly, in the past, we haven't had the ability to make permanent changes to our recordings in the Zoom editor, which is basically saying if you make a superficial change, trimming the start and the finish point of the recording, it was only going to apply to people clicking on the link to watch it. It didn't apply to the file that you downloaded. So in case I'm speaking French, if we were to open a recording from our recordings tab, if we talk about, here's a recording. If I went to play the recording, it opens it up inside your browser. And if you are the host who created the recording, we're going to see some options over here on the right-hand side. I'll pause that, including the scissors for trimming. Everyone familiar with this so far? Yep. We hit the scissors and then we get this blue continuum showing up. Previously, what that meant we could do is that we could drag the start or the finish point or both, and then hit trim. And then if students clicked on the link to watch the recording, they would see just what was inside this space. And that was the only feature that we could get access to in this. It was called topping and tailing. And when people clicked to download the file up in the top right, they got the whole thing, irrespective of whatever trims that you made. So it was a superficial edit. Two things have happened in the interim over the past 2 months. One of them being now any change you make when trimming will apply to the file that gets downloaded as well. So it is a permanent edit, which is nice. We can stop sort of worrying about students downloading it and getting the bits that we didn't want them to hear. Secondly, how this trim bar works has changed. It's not pretty, I'm going to say that up front, but it is highly functional. And what I mean by that is what we can do is, in fact, move and click in multiple spots throughout the continuum for the recording and make edits throughout during the middle of the meeting as well. So what I mean by that is anything that's blue is going to be kept in the recording. Anything not in blue will be excluded when I hit the trim. So if I, for example, had no problem with what was at the end and no problem with what was happening at the beginning, but I wanted to, I can just get rid of some of these, remove. I wanted to exclude a part that was in the middle. I can now do that using multiple trim sections. Is that making sense? When I say it's not pretty, it isn't, because I've got to sit here looking at the timer and I've probably got to play it back and listen to it and make sure I'm getting the right bits and not kind of excluding it. But what's in blue will be kept. What's not in blue will not be kept. So you can now cut out sections from inside the recording, hit trim, and it will then apply permanently to the file. So that's a significant change, because previously we couldn't edit and have it saved permanently, and we couldn't edit anything in the middle of the recording. All we could do was change the start and finish points. So that is an improvement. It's just a bit fiddly in terms of having to play around with the trim bar and how many different areas you wanted to keep or not keep.
Just a quick one, Lachlan.
Please.
If you do your deletions, is there any way of getting it back if you've messed it up?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. So there is a revert or restore button when you edit files. So if I go through this process, it'll then process it and then revert. I think this recording's fairly short, so it won't take too long. But there's then an option to restore the original as well. Hi there, it's Lachlan Kalish here from the, don't listen to that guy. But yeah, you see I'm getting a status thing down the bottom here that it's being trimmed. Once it's finished, you go back to clicking on those scissors and it'll allow you to restore the whole thing. It'll show you the whole continuum again. And then you can just drag those out to include the whole thing. So yeah, not pretty, but it is an improvement. Any more questions about that editing option?
So
Yeah,
Lachlan,
sorry.
Sarah, go ahead.
sorry. So even if it's already downloaded back into the cloud onto the i2 site, I can still go back and sort of top and tail and trim if there's bits that I'd rather not have in there.
Absolutely. And then it will apply retrospectively to the file that's available inside the online meeting tool.
Great. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Annette.
Thanks. So it's not like a save as. You can't keep the original recording and then make a cut down one.
So if you wanted that kind of end result with two files, download first, you'll get the original in all its glory.
Okay.
Then make some changes, come back into the cloud recording, make the changes, and then download again. You'll get two files.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
All righty. Let's keep a roll on. Right, I will say that it's worth looking into your settings in the Zoom portal underneath settings and recording to have a look at what you have as your preferences for how you handle recording. So if we're in the back end in the Zoom portal and we go to recordings, no, I tell a lie. Click on settings. Settings and then recording. The part that what I'm really interested in is this section under cloud recording. There's a whole bunch of options in here, and the more of these you have ticked, the bigger the file is going to be, the longer it will take for your recordings to process. Some of them you may have no need for at all. So for example, for me, I don't want to separately record speaker gallery, shared screen aspects within a recording as separate files. You end up with 7 or 8 different file types at the end of a recording. So for me, I have the active speaker view and the shared screen. When I get a recording, I also capture gallery view because sometimes what I'm trying to do is actually capture all the faces that are in there as well. So those are the two I have recorded. But it is worth looking in here to see whether your transcript option is checked. I think most of the others, I have a caption file that's saved as well as a VTT file for people that want captioning. So do have a look at those at least once to make sure that the output from your recordings is what you expect it to be. All right, let's keep going. Breakout rooms, everybody's favorite. We all love breakout rooms. Students love breakouts. What can I say about it? It has improved a little bit. Firstly, you can now have up to 100 breakout rooms. Imagine 100 breakouts and then jumping into all of them separately. Wouldn't that be amazing? You can have 1,000 participants in a single Zoom meeting, any of your meetings. You can have 1,000 of them in one breakout room or 10 in 100 breakout rooms. So you can have that kind of split from 1 to 1,000 within each of the breakout rooms that you create. When you create breakout rooms and launch, and I will look at this process in just a second, it's important that you're across the 3 stages that we refer to: creation, editing of a breakout, and then live. Sometimes it's worth just kind of reminding yourself which one you're actually in, whether the breakouts are live and happening, whether you're in edit stage, or whether you're back at the beginning at creating them. When you create them, anyone who is labeled as a co-host or a host in your participant list will not be added to a breakout room. But if you make your breakout rooms and then change someone to a co-host or a host, they'll have already been allocated and they will join breakouts when you launch them. This may seem like a bit of a nothing change, but it's important because if your co-hosts are expecting not to be in there until they're ready to be in, and then they get thrown in, which is what happened in the last town hall that we had, it's worth noting that if they want to be excluded from them, you have to have them with those roles before you make the breakouts. There's now an option to do with voice broadcasts into breakouts. I'll show you that in just a second. You've been able to share your screen into breakout rooms from the main room for a little while, but I'll remind you how to do that. You may want to consider pausing your recordings in a Zoom meeting when you launch breakouts, because it doesn't capture anything that happens in the breakout. It's just the main room. So if, for example, the recording's still going and the students all go into the breakouts, and the people who are staying in the main room are having a bit of a rant about whatever, it's being captured in the recording at the same time. So sometimes that's worth reminding them. Again, as happened in the town hall recently. Let's have a look at breakouts. So I've dragged my Zoom interface over here. When we go into breakouts, the host has all of the power with breakouts, really. I'm going to find breakouts right here. This is the creation stage that I mentioned. We determine the number of breakouts that we're going to make. I'll say 3 for whatever reason here. I'm going to assign participants automatically into them. If you're going to have an activity where you have different breakouts for different purposes, this letting participants choose is quite functional. But otherwise, by default, it's assigned automatically, and it'll give you a summary of how many are going into the breakouts based on the current numbers in your participant list. There's 10 of us here. I'm making 3 breakouts, hence 3 participants per room. 9 of you plus 1 host. If I hit create, we are now in edit stage. The breakouts are not live, we're in edit. I can change the name of the breakouts if I want to. I can move people around, exchange them between groups. I can also add additional breakouts if I want to. Down here, we have an options area. Some of them appeared in create, like allowing participants to choose their own rooms. Some of them you may or may not want. Do you want the participants to be able to return back into the main room when they feel like it? Or do you want them to stay in there until you close the breakouts? Do you want them to be put into the breakout rooms as soon as you launch them? Or if you have ghosts in your meeting that are just sitting there, they're not going to join the breakouts until they click on the join button. So that one's usually a good idea to shift them in. And then when you close the meetings, do you want to automatically move them all back? So that's a new one as well. How long do you want them to be open for? You can change that. Do you want to be notified when that time's up as the host? Probably not. I think you're probably going to be aware of it. There's a timer for the people in the breakout rooms you can put on. How long do you want that to be open for? So the breakout settings are still pretty much as they were, but once we launch the breakouts, and what I might do is in fact not push you into the breakouts so that you can see what I'm doing as the host. So everyone stay in the room, don't join the breakouts when I launch them. So I'm not going to move you into the breakouts. Change that setting. And now I'm going to open the breakouts. So we are now in live. The breakout rooms are live. I get a message up here saying everyone's been invited to join. But you're all back here. That's great. Me as the host now, if I want to send a message to the breakouts, I can hit broadcast. And we have an option to send either a text message. It won't include hyperlinks. It's not particularly functional. It's just a brief text message that appears at the top of the screen in the breakouts. I don't really like it that much. But there's also now a broadcast voice option, at which point it'll pick up what's going on in your headset and talk to everybody like the voice of God into the breakout room. So at that point, you know, everybody, don't forget to look at this. If you don't, you're in trouble, whatever. Hit the button first and it'll start that recording. You'll see it moving as you're talking, and that's going into the rooms live, and you hit stop and the broadcast will stop. So that's neat, I guess. Compared to previously, you had to go into the meetings and into each of the breakout rooms. Someone has a comment at that point? Maybe. Not so much?
I think that's great.
Yeah, I like it. It's a bit creepy when it happens to you the first time as a participant, I'm just going to say, but worth
But so
knowing.
does dropping in suddenly and talking, you know, because they're usually focused and they're not looking at the screen. So you frighten them either way.
I want to say when someone joins it, like with a Zoom meeting, you get kind of the headshot first of their profile picture and it sort of says they're joining. You get a kind of a 1 or 2 second bleed. So a bit of a warning, whereas the audio is a little bit, but yeah, absolutely. Look, the share option I was talking about when you want to stream your screen, for example, into a breakout room, it involves you hitting the share screen button. And because I've launched breakouts, there's now an option down the bottom here that says share to breakout rooms. Okay, so you can click that button and hit share. Do you really want to share this to all the breakout rooms? hit share, and then they will all see your screen, live streamed video as such, into the breakouts. I guess think about what you want them to see and why you want them to see it from the main room and what it is, because they are going to see everything you're doing on your screen in the breakouts via the shared area. No audio, no video, sound, etc. It's literally capturing what's going on your screen and streaming it into the breakout. So we've got a way to broadcast audio into the rooms and a way to share what we want. So in theory, you don't have to go into the breakout rooms as a host unless you need to for whatever reason. I think for me, the main question has always been, how do the students let me know that they need me to come in to the breakouts because they've got a problem, etc.? How do they raise that or flag that? And that's a bit trickier because staying in the main room, there isn't really a way to flag that that I've seen so far. But if you're aware of one, by all means, do tell me. You're muted, Ali, sorry. Still muted. There we go.
I think there might be a call for help thing
Option.
that someone can do from a breakout, and then you can go in. Shall
we launch breakouts to see? This time round, when has anyone joined the breakouts? I'm going to go into one. Let's see how that goes. That didn't work so well for me as the host.
That's right. So we need to go into breakout rooms.
There it is. I got the message. Annette Trace has asked for help. Excellent. And where was that button?
Under the options.
Under the option, okay. Let me put it into the chat. I'll show you what the message looked like for the host. There we go. So that's what that option looks like. And of course, because I've moved from sharing screens and not sharing screens, etc., it stopped what I had in the main room again. So I'll bring that back up. But yeah, the chat pod, the message that I got from Annette when she went in there looked exactly like that. All right, so there is a way to request help from within the breakouts, and that tells you to jump in. So that's good.
Lachlan,
anything else on breakouts?
So just quickly, can you set up breakout rooms sort of prior to the meeting if you have to manually add participants? I've been involved in a session before where people had to be allocated to specific rooms, and it's really boring if they sit there while you allocate them manually, or is that just how it has to be?
There's two answers to this one. It's a really good question, Sarah. In the Zoom portal in the back end, when you create a meeting, there is a facility to pre-assign breakout rooms.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that it requires that everyone that's going to be in the meeting is registered as a CSU Zoom user.
Yeah.
It's almost guaranteed that not all your students are going to fit into that category. When you are in a meeting up front, if I go into back into creating breakout rooms, you can make this at any point in time once you start the meeting. So if you jumped in before everyone else gets there and you create the rooms with their names, etc. So they're sitting there ready, and then you can sort of start assigning. But pre-creating breakout rooms in the back end, if I was to go into, I don't know, there's a meeting. If I go into this particular meeting, the settings for it in the back end, where is my breakout option? What if I edit? Right down the bottom under options, alternative host, breakout room pre-assign. All right, so you can pre-assign breakout rooms. The problem that we have with that function is that the participants that we want to assign to it, it's not really going to work unless they all have Zoom accounts. So you can create the rooms in advance, but pre-assigning participants to it is problematic.
Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
That's okay. It's a good question. All right, let's keep going. I'm aware time is getting away from me, so I may have to speed things up just a little. Zoom whiteboards. Zoom has had a whiteboard feature for a while. The whiteboard feature has been improved several times. You can create them in advance from the back end in the Zoom portal, for example. There is an item over here on the left that says whiteboards. Just check, can everyone see my screen at the moment? Yep, beauty. You can use some pre-existing templates if you like. All of your pre-made whiteboards will be sitting there ready for you to launch in the meeting if you want, or you can create a new one. When you get prompted to create a new one, it's going to give you the option to choose from templates or just a blank one. I don't really want to use a template, thanks. I'll just make my own. It all really comes down to how you want the whiteboard to function. Are you using it just for the meeting? Do you want people to access it after, asynchronously? Do you want them to be able to view it? Do you want them to be able to edit it? All of that is controlled through this share button, top right-hand corner. How do we want it to work? I want anyone to be able to get to it. I want people outside of our organization. That organization setting never works. People just aren't in the right databases or whatever. So make sure the external users box is checked. Then you've got link access, and then down the bottom there, only invited members. No thanks. Right down the bottom, anyone with the link. This is what I'm going for when I make a whiteboard. Generally, I want anyone with the link, and I want them to be able to access it and to be able to edit it. So if you copy the link at that point, people will be able to access this whiteboard and work on it, whether or not it's live or not. Similarly, if we come back to our Zoom meeting and the whiteboards button that's here, if I click on whiteboards, it will bring up a preview of exactly the same thing that we were looking at a minute ago. I can either create a new one and launch it within the meeting, or I can access a pre-made one. So if I have one here that I've made before, I get asked in the live meeting, how do I want it to open this? So I want people to be able to collaborate and edit the board. Do I want people to be able to edit it after the meeting? Yes, please. Let's go with that. It now opens it in the meeting with all of us. So you all should see that as a shared screen. In the meeting, there is a bar on the left-hand side that gives you options for what you want to do in this whiteboard. So for example, if I wanted everyone to take a sticky note or to put some text in there and start adding those sticky notes into a particular area, how do we cope in winter? What do we do with food, for example? So if you were talking about soup, something highly exciting, you can put that in there and drag yours around. You can click again in the other section.
Sorry, Lachlan, my screen seems to be black. Does anybody else have that, or should we be able to see something on there?
It's a very good question. When was the last time you updated Zoom, Tamika?
I was just checking when you had a look, and I should be updating now. So maybe that's why.
Yeah, that's going to be what it is. Yeah. So the whiteboard kind of functionality is about 3 months old, maybe, but that's what it's going to be once you finish updating. Can you see in the shared screen the whiteboard that
It's saying I'm viewing your whiteboard, but to me, it's a black screen. I can't see anything on there.
For you. Let me take a screenshot of you.
But that's okay.
I'll take a snip so you can see what we're kind of doing at the moment.
Thank you.
But I can see people have gone nuts in there, which is fine. I'll just
I guess for so say if I was presenting, if somebody hadn't had an updated one, they wouldn't be able to use the whiteboard either. Is that correct?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Yep.
Now I've put it in the chat so you can see a snip in the chat of what the whiteboard's looking like. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can. Excellent. Thank you.
No worries. So also down in the bottom right-hand corner, when you're using the whiteboard tool, you have the ability to add additional pages, so new whiteboards. So if you've worked on one and then you wanted to go into a subsequent whiteboard with a different activity on it, etc., you can do that. You need to click on that page option down in the bottom right-hand corner. So I can see people have used the drawing tool, the text tool, Post-it notes far and away are the most popular use of this to date. You can change the color of your Post-it notes and other exciting things. I'm going to stop. I'm going to close the whiteboard for a second, which I've done. I will share my screen again. Now, if I was to have a look at my whiteboards in the back end of Zoom, in the Zoom portal, including the one that we've just been working on, if I find it, I think that was this one. Me as the host, what would I want to do with a whiteboard after the fact? As we said, we can choose to share that board and give people the link to post to it and do things if they weren't in the live meeting. Share and copy the link. The other option I have is that I can export the whiteboard. So if you want a PDF or a backup of what happened in the whiteboard to share with your students after the fact, you can do that in here. You can also do other things like turning off the grid view if you don't want dots on there and you just want it blank, or you want lines and other exciting things like that. You can do that sort of thing in here. You can also lock it so that people can't post to it after the fact, that sort of thing. So there are a few options with whiteboards that didn't exist before, but you can access it both in the live meeting and after the fact. So that's the whiteboard tool in a nutshell. Have a play around with it. Figure out maybe if you want to use some of those other templates, pre-create the boards, open them in the meeting itself. It's generally the way we go about it. Any questions on whiteboards before I keep going?
I noticed that when we were like fiddling with that, our name came up. Is there any way to make that anonymous?
Yes, there's a setting in there for posting anonymous to the whiteboard. It's again to do with the now you're putting me on the spot, Annette.
Ooh, sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm going to look and I will send it the information after the fact. It'll be in my settings somewhere. Yeah. Anonymous posting. That's a good question. Okay. Let's keep going. We're almost there. We've got 5 minutes. The Zoom Activity Center. Fascinating thing in the Zoom desktop application. Remember, we talked about that. Clicking on the icon on your desktop and it brings up this box. There's this bell icon that sits there. This is the Zoom Activity Center, which is a bit of a new thing. It will show you any activity happening in Zoom meetings that you have access to. So when a recording is published, when a transcript is made available, by and large, when meetings start, etc., you're going to get an update to do with that happening inside the Activity Center. That may be of value for you if you're looking to see when something's finished. But I think a lot of people bypass the need for this because of their notifications. So if I'm getting into my settings in the back end of Zoom, in the Zoom portal, looking at settings and getting into meeting and email notifications, this area is kind of important for you to be across. How many things do you want to get emails about from Zoom? If you're adding an alternative host, if a recording is finished, if a transcript is available, do you want your alternative host to be notified when a recording is finished? When people are showing up to your meetings before you being there, do you want to be notified? It's worth looking through the notifications section and deciding how much is too much or not enough, etc. So get into that particular area of your settings, and meeting settings, email notifications. It's important you stay across it. So the Activity Center is kind of novel, but if you've got your notifications set properly, you won't need it. And the last area I had, what else have we got going on? There is a meeting timer option that you can turn on going into your desktop application settings and general. So if I go desktop application settings and general, there is a meeting timer option here. It's off by default. You switch it on, we come back into our meeting, and for me now, up here at the top of my meeting. Can everyone see that little timer that's there now? So it's showing me at the moment the duration. I can change it to time remaining. And it's telling me, oh, I got 1 minute and 58 seconds to go. So if you want a timer in your meetings, I think the reason it was turned off by default was because it was freaking students out in exams when they were doing invigilated Zoom exams, and there was a, you know, tick, 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 tick thing going on. Ingrid.
Really, most probably silly question. I work from home. How can I download this Zoom desktop app? Can I download it from here?
If you just Google download Zoom, that'll give you the Zoom desktop application. Are you sure you don't have it there already on your desktop somewhere?
No, I don't have it. I have to go. I access it by going through the, you know, the CSU Zoom thing and sign in, and then it comes up.
So is it opening Zoom in your web browser, like inside Chrome, or in its own kind of Zoom window?
Zoom window by itself, but I would love to have the timer because I go over and I've got to have my phone and keep on fiddling every time I run a class, which is awkward. So I would love to have that option.
No worries. All right, look, I'll send you an email after this anyway on how to find it, but I think you've actually got it installed, but it's not sitting on your desktop yet. So that's an easy fix.
I'll do that. I just go down and pin it to desktop then. I'll
100%. That's exactly what you want to do.
Okay, thanks for that.
You're welcome. All right, what else we got going on? So that's the timer. You can set it for duration or time remaining, and it is an individual setting. So you may like it, not like it, turn it off, turn it on. Participants can also turn it off. You can, that's based on their own preference. Okay. There is an option here for you to turn off your view of yourself. So if you're in a Zoom meeting and you don't want to see your own face on a webcam, it's under the views. If I go up to view, top right-hand corner, there is an option now to hide your self view. And that way you only see the people in the meeting and not yourself. It doesn't change them being able to see you, but it stops you having to look at you if that's a thing that's problematic for you. What else we got going on? Sometimes I get asked about the Zoom avatar feature. If you're really keen on looking for it, it's under your video settings. Having a look, but it's basically putting an avatar of a cow or a fox or something else of yourself instead of your own profile picture. Go crazy if that's your thing. Yep. I do have to remind you about when you're using the record automatically option when you're scheduling your meetings, which a lot of people want to do. They don't want to have to think about hitting record and hitting stop record, etc. If you're going to use it, you cannot check the option that says allow entry before the host. The reason for that is you're going to be capturing students without their permission. They're not going to get any notification that they're being recorded. And quite often you don't want your recording to have 10 minutes of students talking about whatever before it starts. So in other words, choose one or the other. If you're going to let students into the meeting before they turn up, then it's up to you to start the recording and stop it when you're ready or finish the meeting. But if you want it to record automatically, don't check the box that allows them to come before you show up, before the host. There is a screen share preview option, which is kind of new. I'll show you where it is. Once you start sharing your screen and you have this screen sharing bar down the bottom that you might be familiar with, underneath it now, there is this screen sharing preview, which will show you what the other people are seeing. So if you're not sure exactly what they're seeing and you want confirmation of it, instead of saying, can everybody see my screen? You can click underneath that bar and you'll see the preview of what's being shared. That's a relatively new feature, which is handy. And just a reminder, more for myself than for you guys, turn off everything else you've got, which is going to throw notifications into your meeting and your recording potentially. So for me, Teams, Skype, emails, Google notifications, all of the above, they always seem to pop up in our Zoom meetings and we mightn't necessarily want them to be seen. So turn those things off if you can, but particularly before you start recording. And that's it. I'm almost to time. But I'm going to stop the recording in a second. But if anybody has any questions about any of this stuff or anything I haven't covered, I'm happy to hang around for a second as well and chat through those. Otherwise, happy teaching for this session, and reach out if you've got particular things you want to talk to me about. Have a great week.
Just a quick one, Lachlan.
Go ahead.
I've been trying to access your YouTube sites. Is there a specific thing? Because I put in CSU professional, whatever. Did you say it was professional learning page? So how do you get hold of that?
That's a great question. The best way is probably through the Division of Learning and Teaching website. If you type in CSU DLT in a Google search, it'll bring that up. But on that page, there is a section under professional learning. And once that actually loads, it's a bit of a slow website. I do apologize, but the actual YouTube channel is embedded there. But I will also send you the link, Carl, to it directly. Yeah. But the actual YouTube channel itself has a lot of videos and recordings and other things on it in the playlist that you can basically go through from there. But I'll provide you with the list. In fact, I'll do that in the chat as we speak. Sarah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just wondering about co-hosts and alternate hosts. So I've set up all the Zoom meetings for our subject in the I2 site, but I'm not always the one delivering the content. So I've actually got Carl and Namdi who are both here with me. We all teach together, but I know yesterday I don't think Namdi was able to see the pausing recordings, were you, Namdi? So no. I had to still be there to kind of do that bit for him.
I've stopped pausing and restarting recordings,
or even just so that Namdi could have control of the meeting completely. Did
you make them a co-host?
How do I do that?
Okay.
I'm not sure that I've done it correctly or know how to do it.
All right. So the main thing is your control over roles is done through your participant view.
Yeah.
So when you've got your participants up and you can see them in there, you'll see the dots. The host is the person with all the power. So if I was to turn around and say, right, Namdi, I want to make him a host or a co-host.
Yeah.
Click on the dots, make them a host or a co-host. Recording is tricky because if you initiate recording as a host, it's going to keep recording until you stop it.
Yeah.
He, on the other hand, could make his own recording and pause and start that as well. But all of this will flow back into the online meeting tool in the subject site based on your recording, not his, because you're the person who created the meeting.
Yeah.
So most of that kind of control over what's happening with the recording, it doesn't just change hands from you to him and the same recording file. It stays with you as the person who initiated the recording.
Rightio. And I can only make, say, Namdi or Carl co-hosts once we're in the meeting.
You can add them to, as an alternative host by going into the back end of the Zoom meeting. Find it in here under your meetings. Find the meeting that you're particularly interested in.
Yeah.
Edit the meeting. Right down the bottom. Under your options, you're going to get alternative hosts.
All
right. So add them in there and they will join the meeting as a host or a co-host. If you don't turn up, they'll come in as a host automatically. Otherwise, they'll come in as a co-host.
That's what we were after. Yeah.
That's the one.
That's
if you do that in the back end, don't try and do it through the subject site.
Yep. Perfect.
You're welcome.
Problem solved. Thank you.
Okay. And Tamika.
Yes, just a quick one. I just want to know, you know how we come in, you had your music on there. What's the best way to do that?
Oh, good question. Okay, so this is about when you're sharing. I'll stop sharing my screen for a second. Actually, I'm going to share my screen because I need you to see what I see.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so here I am as the host. And I'm going to go down here and click this share screen option.
Mm-hmm.
When I click share, I get this dialog coming up. We've got two options. If you only want to show, you only want people to hear music and not see a screen, you can go across into advanced and share computer audio. And then whatever you're playing on your machine will be streamed into the room, YouTube, whatever else. Obviously, don't have your recording started if you don't want that captured in there. If you want your screen shared and also sound down the bottom here, screen 1 is selected to be shared and sound, and then hit share and that will get both streamed into the room. Sound okay?
Yeah, so I just need to have music, say, playing in the background.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be on mute, or I could still be on mute. Is that how it works?
Yeah, you can mute yourself.
Yeah.
That's
So I
fine.
can
It's just
mute
capturing
myself
whatever's
and-
playing through your computer. So for me,
Yep.
I usually have YouTube, for example, open on another screen,
Yep.
playing whatever, and then I come in and just share. Usually it's the screen and the sound,
And
but
the
as I said,
sound,
if you
yep.
just wanted the sound, you could go advanced in computer
Yeah.
audio. That'll do that as well.
Right. I thought it'd probably be the screen with the welcome and whatever, and then just some music in the background. That's very nice.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
If you've got multiple monitors, then you're set. It's golden.
Yeah,
Just have
yep.
what you want them to see in here over there, and
Mhm.
the things you don't want them to see, like the YouTube channel, for example, on the other screen.
Yep.
Yep.
Excellent. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Can I just check on the same note?